the only students who are here. Let's begin. Okay, guys, welcome to the second trimester classes. Yesterday was the last day in order for you to load up all your assignment or things that you left. So today we're going to start a new chapter. The topic of this, let me see, the topic of this chapter is the Italian Renaissance, el Renacentismo, the Renaissance, okay? Why Renaissance? Because after all these bad things that happened in the Middle Ages, so this is like, it comes like a fresh water in order to reborn everything in those areas, okay? So as an introduction, we want to watch a video that talks and discuss about this, the end of, like it says, the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance in Italian, which started in Italy, Florence, specific in Florence, okay? So let's watch this short video. Let's see.
This is Mr. Fredo. Here we go, episode 2 in our study of the Renaissance for our quick mini lessons. An important question to ask, how does this start? Prior to this time period in Western Europe's history was around 1,000 years of just death, disaster, and misery within the Middle Ages. So how does this completely different time period, when the light goes back on and people in Europe and Europe as a whole come back to life, how does that happen? Well, there isn't really a simple answer for that. It's really a combination of several factors that independently come in contact with each other or find ways to intermix that ends up creating this new time period. It's kind of like actually how like middle school relationships start. You have a crush on someone, so then you tell your friend to go talk to them, and then that person hears about it, so they tell another friend on whether or not they like you back, and if they like you back, then they bring in someone else to kind of set up the first time that you're going to talk to each other. It's a really roundabout way of getting something to happen. That's kind of how the Renaissance starts as well. So we focus on 4 main factors that causes the shift from the Middle Ages to this new time period, the Renaissance. And it all starts with the end of the Black Death. Until this Black Death doesn't go away, Europe has no chance of fighting out of the Middle Ages because of the destruction that it caused. Because people started to isolate themselves and they stopped trading and they stopped interacting, that allowed the disease to effectively die out throughout Western Europe to the point where it wasn't going to spread as massively as it did before. So it kind of gives them a breath of, no pun intended, fresh air where they can get back to doing things. As soon as that isolation has taken into effect and the disease has died out, people move back into the cities. And that's when people start to talk again. They start to collaborate again. They start to be able to interact and come up with new ideas that they couldn't do as long as the Black Death was around. That's really the first step. Second big event is the rediscovery of Greek and Roman ideas that had been destroyed throughout Europe but were preserved in the Holy Land, and they're rediscovered during the Crusades. All of those great Greek and Roman ideas that focused on science and artwork and engineering and not just about religion, they had been destroyed in Europe over the course of hundreds of years for a variety of factors. One, just because of the simple destruction that occurred throughout the Middle Ages. But two, also because of the Catholic Church would take those books, and if they contradicted Catholic Church teachings in any way, they would be set on fire. So those ideas and those philosophies and beliefs, they were destroyed throughout Western Europe, but they were preserved in the Holy Land, because this is an area that wasn't affected by the death and destruction of the Middle Ages in Western Europe. And this is a place where the Greeks had set up colonies near, and this is a place where the Romans had conquered. So when the Europeans travel there, they find all of the, remember, the Crusades took place over a couple hundred years. Over time, they come in contact and come back in contact with these ideas that they never even knew existed. And over a course of a long period of time, those ideas are brought back to Western Europe. And when put in use and put in place, and they become actually used, it creates a different world, because instead of just focusing on religion, now they're focusing on Greek and Roman ideas about science and art and architecture. And again, it creates a complete shift in thinking. Number 3, maybe the most important invention in the history of the world, the Gutenberg printing press. Prior to this printer, that's what it is. books were extremely rare in Western Europe, and they were extremely expensive because there were so few of them. They cost a lot of money just to own, and most of them were only in Latin. The Gutenberg printing press changes all of that. Instead of having to copy these books in Latin by hand like monks would do in monasteries, the Gutenberg press acts like printers do today. Now, obviously not as fast as some of the printers that we have now, but still much faster than the going standard of copying these books by hand. And they can be printed in native languages, so the languages that people actually understood. So if you're from Italy, you could get a book in Italian. If you were from Spain, you could get a book in Spanish. And it could be about all different types of topics, about science, about math, about engineering, about artwork, you name it. All of those were available because the Gutenberg press allowed so many different books to be printed. And perhaps most importantly, because there's more books, the price goes way down. Now that there's so many, they're not as expensive, and that gives the population of Europe a greater accessibility to knowledge. This is essentially like the internet of the 1400s by the time it's created in 1450. Major game changer with this invention. And then lastly, guilds. Guilds are these organizations of people who all do the same thing and really care about the quality of the work that they produce. So there could be any type of guilds. There could be sculpting guilds. There could be painting guilds. There could be guilds for finance or banking. But all of these people are working in the same environment, and they're competing against each other because they know in order to be accepted into that guild, their work has to be of the highest quality, because the only way you were going to be taken seriously as a professional, regardless of what your profession was if you were accepted into a guild. That gave you credibility. That was a big deal. So the guilds, and because of the competition created within a guild, it raises the quality of everything that's produced throughout Western Europe in a big, big way. One of the decisions you're going to have to make as a historian is which of these factors is most responsible for the start of the Renaissance. And it's a tough choice because as you really examine these, you'll start to see that there's a lot of overlap between these four main factors in the shift from Middle Ages to this great time period, the Renaissance.
Very well. This is as an introduction of this the Renaissance in Italy. Let me fix this. Now I have another video that basically here in this chapter there are two very important characters here in very important characters here in this section. One of those is Mr. Leonardo da Vinci, and the other one, I think, Michelangelo. Okay, over here I have a video as an introduction of Leonardo da Vinci. Let me see if it's this one. Let me see this one. Let's see. Yes.
Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, and scientist. He was born on April 15, 1452, in the town of Vinci, Italy. His father's name was Piero da Vinci, and mother's name was Caterina. Not much is known about his childhood, other than his father was wealthy and had a number of wives. Very little is known about Leonardo da Vinci's early life, and, for many years, about the age of 14, he became an apprentice to a famous artist named Verrocchio. He learned to paint and sculpt under him, and was also taught the basics of metallurgy, drafting, chemistry, botany, cartography, and carpentry at his workshop. He collaborated with Verrocchio on a number of paintings, such as the Baptism of Christ. By 1472, Leonardo qualified as a master in the Guild of St. Luke, an association of artists and doctors. One of his earliest drawings is Arno Valley, a sketch of the valley of the same name, which was made on August 5, 1473, with the help of Verrocchio. In 1478, he received two important painting commissions, viz. Saint Jerome in the Wildernesses and Adoration of the Magi, both of which were never completed. From 1478 to 1480, he painted Madonna of the Carnation, an oil painting with the central motifs of young Mary and baby Jesus on her lap and a carnation in her left hand. The next important works were The Virgin of the Rocks and Madonna of the Rocks, which were similar in style but differed in composition. He was commissioned to create a massive horse statue for a patron. One of his greatest paintings, The Last Supper, was commissioned to him by the Duke Lodovico Sforza, and Leonardo worked on it from 1495 to 1498. In the year 1500, Leonardo was appointed as the military architect and engineer. In 1502, he entered the service of Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, and created a map of Cesare City, at a time when maps were not very common. In 1503, Leonardo went to Florence and began painting a mural of the Battle of Anghiari, which took him 2 years to complete. He started painting his masterpiece, Mona Lisa, also called La Gioconda, around the same time, and completed it in 1506. In 1506, he returned to Milan, and many of his prominent pupils began to work with him. He was obsessed with flight and had plans for building something similar to a helicopter in 1502. He wrote several books throughout his lifetime, including Codex on the Flight of Birds in 1505, a scientific palimpsest containing 18 folios. The Vitruvian Man is a drawing created by Leonardo da Vinci in 1490 and depicts two superimposed positions of a male figure. He was not attracted to women, but developed a close friendship with his patrons, Cecilia Gallerani, and the two Este sisters, Isabella and Beatrice. Vinci died on 2 May 1519 in Amboise, Kingdom of France, at the age of 67.
As you see, he was a very, very impressive person. He was such a creative person. Was a genius. Really, he really was a genius. He created different things that in those years they thought he was crazy, but he was a genius. Okay, now the other one was Michelangelo. Michelangelo. Let me see if we can get some video about Michelangelo. I don't want to start the class today because you are the only ninth grader, and I don't want you to go everything at the same my job. Michelangelo's, not the Michelangelo. Okay, really, Michelangelo's. Michelangelo biography. Let's look for biography. Biography. Michelangelo. Okay, this is the one.
Today we're going to learn about the famous artist Michelangelo. Michelangelo de Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni, known simply as Michelangelo, was an Italian Renaissance sculptor, painter, architect, and poet. He was born in 1475 in Caprese, Italy. When he was still very young, his family returned to Florence, and his mother died when he was only 6 years old. Michelangelo's father sent him to school, but he was not very interested in learning what was taught there. All he wanted to do was paint and become an artist. In 1488, when he was 13 years old, Michelangelo was apprenticed to an artist, Domenico Ghirlandaio, and in 1490 he was sent to continue his training with the powerful Medici family. Over the next few years, he began producing sculptures and honing his skills. In 1496, Michelangelo moved to Rome. While there, he was commissioned to create a statue of Jesus after he was crucified, laying in the lap of his mother Mary. Michelangelo was 24 years old when he completed this statue, called Pietà, which is regarded as one of the greatest masterpieces of sculpture in the history of the world. Michelangelo returned to Florence and accepted another commission, to create a statue of David from a huge block of marble. He worked on the sculpture for more than 2 years. When it was finished, the statue of David was more than 17 feet or 5 meters tall and weighed around 6 tons. Today, David is Michelangelo's most famous sculpture. In 1505, the newly elected Pope Julius II invited Michelangelo to return to Rome to create his tomb, a project he worked on off and on for the next 40 years. 3 years later, he received another commission when the Pope asked him to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo considered himself a sculptor and not a painter, and did not want to take the job, but he could not refuse the Pope. The work in the Sistine Chapel took 4 years to complete, and was more than 134 feet or 41 meters in length, and 46 feet or 14 meters in width. Michelangelo painted a total of 343 figures depicting stories from the Bible, including the creation of Adam, which is one of the most famous paintings in history. Painting on a ceiling was difficult. Michelangelo had to work on a scaffolding that brought him high enough to reach it. Contrary to popular belief, he did not lie down to work, but stood and painted above his head. After his work in the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo was considered a great artist. He made many statues, paintings, drawings, and frescoes. He wrote hundreds of poems. He was also an architect and designed the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. Michelangelo was so famous that there were 2 biographies of him published while he was still alive. He died in 1564 at the age of 88, only 3 weeks before his 89th birthday. Today, Michelangelo is considered one of the foremost artists of the High Renaissance, alongside Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci. He had a profound impact on the artists that followed him, and continues to be studied today. His works are among the most famous and widely reproduced in history. I hope you enjoyed learning about the famous artist, Michelangelo, and seeing some of his beautiful work.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, I didn't know that he drew like 400 and something pictures in the 16th chapter. I didn't know that. Okay, guys, we don't have enough time. It's 12:11. I don't wanna keep you here, guys.